All right, let's start with the big story that we are tracking at this hour on WION, where China is marking its 70 years as the People's Republic with an extravagant display of the Chinese military prowess. The Chinese President Xi Jinping inspected the People's Liberation Army troops and the military equipment, including tanks and the indigenously developed missile systems and its fighter jets. In his address to the nation, Xi Jinping laid out China's roadmap and also highlighted three pillars of growth, they being the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, the Communist Party, and also the Chinese public.
鸣礼炮，全部动！
China tomorrow will be even more prosperous.
全党、
The party,
全军、
the army,
全国各
and the
族人民
people of all ethnic groups
要更加紧密地
must be
团结
more
起来，
firmly united.
不忘初心，
Remain true to our
牢记
original
使命，
aspiration and keep our mission firmly
继续
in
把我
mind.
们
And even China's intercontinental ballistic missile systems were on full display during the parade, which was an exercise of projecting China's global military and economic clout. Now, despite the challenges in Hong Kong and an economic slowdown, China has left no stone unturned in showing off its military prowess. Now, Xi Jinping has also spoken about the situation in Hong Kong and has vowed to uphold the one country, two systems arrangement.
伟大的坚持
We must
和平统一、
remain
一
committed
国
to
两
the
制的方
strategy of
针，
peaceful reunification and one
保
country,
持
two
香港、
systems. We
澳
will
门
maintain
长期
long-term
繁荣
prosperity
稳定，
and stability of Hong
推
Kong
动
and Macau.
海峡两岸关
Advance
系
the peaceful
和平发
development
展，
of cross-strait relations.
团结全体中华儿女，
Unite the whole country
继续为实现祖国
and
完全
continue
统一
to strive for
而奋
the
斗。
complete unification of our country.
All right, so even as China celebrated 70th anniversary, Hong Kong, on the other hand, continues to be in a bit of a lockdown. On the eve of the 70th National Day, hundreds of protesters gathered near the Victoria Harbour and formed a human chain. They also used green frog soft toys, which have recently come to symbolize this summer of protests. And also in Hong Kong's Won Chai district, pro-democracy activists had a scuffle with the police that ended with multiple arrests being made. Now, despite Hong Kong police's warnings to the protesters, there were demonstrations across the city. Posters calling the October the 1st as a day of grief also popped up across the city. Now, the Chinese government has been trying to ensure that the protests do not overshadow its National Day celebrations, and this, of course, is the image that it wants to portray to the rest of the world. Not of the protests unfolding in Hong Kong, not of the Uyghur re-education camps, but of this pomp and splendor and the military might that China wants to exhibit on the occasion of its 70th National Day. And it also wants to try and get the message across to the world that this is a very different China from what has been seen in the past. However, in Hong Kong, though, the rail operators have shut down certain metro stations out of a fear of confrontation. The shopping malls have also shut their shutters. But a flag-raising ceremony was, of course, conducted as the city remains in a complete bit of a lockdown, with violence between the protesters and the police having reached alarming levels in recent days. And President Xi Jinping, in his National Day address, called for the preservation of the one country, two systems arrangement and said that Hong Kong and Macau will still develop and progress along with the mainland. All right, now to give us a sense of what is in fact unfolding in China and also in Hong Kong, we are joined in by our correspondent Grace Lee, who is joining us from Hong Kong. Good morning to you, Grace. Give us a sense of what's unfolding in where you are in Hong Kong, and how is the China's National Day celebrations being observed there?
Well, as you can see behind me, it's just kind of business as usual here. But if you look a little bit closer, most of the shops in Hong Kong have been shuttered, big and small. You mentioned that, all of the major malls have been shut down in anticipation of what might happen later today. And police have already made several appeals to Hong Kong's people to stay indoors today and to not go out and participate in these protests, and to not be caught up in any of the violence that might happen later today. Now, just to give you an idea of the plan that will potentially unfold later today for protesters, there are several rallies that are planned, not just on Hong Kong Island, but also on the Kowloon side, and a lot of smaller protests that are happening alongside the major one, which will go from Causeway Bay to Central today. Now, we've seen a couple of protests like that in the past couple of days, most notably on Sunday, where things became very escalated. We saw major clashes between police and protesters that day, with petrol bombs being thrown by protesters and police responding with tear gas and water cannons. And we're expecting to see very similar scenes today as well. Police have even floated the idea that there might be, apparent suicide attacks. They talked about this at a press conference yesterday, saying that they're concerned that there may be some major dangerous attacks happening here. But of course, protesters have pushed back, saying that those claims are unsubstantiated, and that, it might actually not be coming from protesters, but these claims might be coming from pro-Beijing factions online. So we'll have to see what happens there.
Absolutely, indeed. And also in his address to the nation, we heard Xi Jinping, strike up some kind of a conciliatory tone, where he said that Beijing would like the one country, two systems compromise to in fact continue. And he said that there will not be a compromise. And this is something exactly what the protesters have been demanding from their administration as well. Because in the past, Xi Jinping has been very strident about one China. He said that there will be no compromise. But there is a certain concession or a climb down in Xi Jinping's position in his address to the nation.
Right. So we'll have to wait and see later this afternoon to see how protesters respond to Xi Jinping's words earlier today. But all in all, in the past couple of weeks, protesters have been saying that they don't trust China's government anymore, and they don't trust their own government, no matter what they say. Carrie Lam, Hong Kong's chief executive, first came under fire for this extradition bill that was going to be passed. And it took several attempts for her to try and regain trust from the Hong Kong public, ultimately pulling that bill. But protesters have said that it's too late, and that they will continue to march and to rally and to fight for what they believe are fundamental freedoms that they would like to have here in Hong Kong. So despite Xi Jinping's words today, we are still expecting to see protesters out in full force. And we'll have to wait to see how they respond to his exact words today.
Absolutely, indeed. And just before I let you go, Grace, do we know as to what Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, is doing? Initially, she had said that she will be taking part in these China National Day celebrations in Hong Kong. And later, there were reports that emerged that, she may not be in Hong Kong on the occasion of China celebrating its National Day in Hong Kong.
Right. So it's been pretty chaotic here, especially when it comes to the government's schedule for these celebrations. They announced earlier last week that these celebrations will be toned down, and they've had to change a couple of routes and a couple of scheduling today. So it's still not clear what exactly Carrie Lam will be doing today. The flag-raising ceremony seems to have gone off without a hitch, but as for later celebrations in the evening, the fireworks especially will probably be hindered by the protests here. We're not sure if that's still scheduled to go on, and whether or not Carrie Lam will be making an appearance there.
All right, we'll have to leave you there. Thank you very much indeed, Grace, for joining us and getting us all those updates from Hong Kong. We'll, of course, come back to you as more details emerge as the day progresses.